Let's shed a little more light on this. There we go. Okay, well, we've got our hatch. It's had time to dry. It's had about a week to dry since I last videoed. And it literally is tucking that front end under the nose piece there. And then snap, and down it goes. And that is as simple as it gets to remove. You just hook your fingernail under there and off it comes. Really, really easy stuff. So anyway, that's done. That's complete. Now in this video, I think we ought to get the electronics installed. So let me just grab our box of bits. Now, if you purchased this aircraft without the receiver, then you won't have a receiver in this box. But if you do, then the type that you ordered should be marked on here with our red dabber. So let me just open this up. If you do need to get the receiver, the types that are available are listed on the product page of the Cricket, but that's the little beastie there. You can just see it through. It's tiny, and that has an onboard electronic speed controller. You can see the little black motor connector there, and it also has 4 ports for servos. So we'll actually only be using 2 of those ports for the Cricket. But there we go. That's the little beast. You can also get this with stabilization as well, if you're into that. So before we do that, let's pull out the 2 servos that are supplied. You should have these in your box, whether you ordered the receiver or not. We'll leave the prop in there for now. We don't need that, and obviously we'll grab the receiver. And you should also have one or maybe a couple of these little sticky, what they're known as servo pads, but we use them for the receiver itself. So one of those too. Now, before we put any of this electronics into the aircraft, we're going to test it just to make sure it's all working, get it hooked up to our transmitter, and then we can be confident when we've installed it that it should behave as we want it to. So let me just get all of this unpacked and get my receiver, my transmitter up here, and we'll get testing. So here's our little selection of electronics. I'll go over them again. So we've got the 2 servos. They're rotary servos, so they look like normal servos, but just a little bit smaller. Somebody mentioned to me at a show once, "Oh, you even do scale models of servos," so, which I thought was quite apt. So these little rotary servos, they come with 3 different arms within the packet they arrive in. This is the arm that you need, the single arm with 2 holes, and that obviously pops onto the servo itself, but we won't do that just yet. And they also come with a very tiny retaining screw, which then goes, once you've got the arm on, you pop that through, and that should secure the arm to the servo itself. Although I find that the friction fit is actually almost good enough, but belt and braces with the screws. We're not going to put these on yet. These will go on when we've connected up the tail feathers. So I'm going to put these small parts in a little pot just off camera, so I don't lose them, and we can grab those later when we need them. Also within the box, you should have, if you've got the receiver, you should have a little binding instruction leaflet, which also shows you how to, or explains how to hook this up to a PC as well, hook the receiver up to a PC, and you can change all sorts of settings on it. If you've got the stabilized version as well, you can actually set all the gains on it, and you can also change the function of all of these sockets as well. So, but on here, it also shows you as factory default what each of the sockets is. So we need to know that, obviously, when we're plugging in our elevator and rudder. We know that the elevator and rudder are the two sockets that are sitting longitudinally on the PCB. So it's that one there and that one there. So, and this socket here is also that's the M-bus socket, which you can allocate a function to, but it also is the interface for plugging this thing into a PC and then manipulating the onboard firmware, as it were. So, okay, let's pop that to one side for now. So we've got it for reference, and we will just hook up our servos to the ports that we're going to be using. So we'll pop one there and one there. Be relatively careful when plugging these in, and make sure you get the right orientation. You can see on here the pins themselves are at one side of the socket. If you look into the socket, you'll see that the pins in there are to one side as well. So obviously you want to marry those up. There are some little runners on the sides that should go down the slots in the socket as well. But it's a fairly tight fit. So just be careful when pushing in, and also obviously be even more careful when pulling them out. You need to sort of tease them out. If you've got fingernails, you can get fingernails either side of the top of the connector, and then just give it a little bit of a wiggle to get the socket out. Don't try and yank it out by the cable. That can obviously pull the cables out, or stretch them, or disconnect them. You might not even see it. But the other thing is you can also wrench the socket off the PCB if you're not careful. So do be careful when plugging in or unplugging your servo sockets. So there we go. We've got those plugged in, and all we need to do now is pop the battery on to power up the receiver. I'm using this is an eFlight 300 milliamp hour with the little connector, which is a 1.25 pitch. So let's just pop that in, and then hopefully things don't start smoking and getting hot and melting your cutting mat. What you should see is a little flashing light that eventually starts flashing fast. So in that the slow blink, it's looking for a previous connection to a transmitter. Obviously it hasn't found one. It's the first time this unit's been powered up, as far as I know. And so now it's gone into bind mode. So this is bind mode. I can switch my transmitter on now and get things connected up. So there we go. So obviously it depends on which transmitter you are using. I'm going to go and I'm going to select. You can obviously make a new one, but I've got several blank ones here at the moment, so I'll select one of those, and then we need to go to a bind. And I don't know whether this is actually going to bind. With Spectrum, you tend to have to walk away a bit to get things bound.
Bind failed.
There we go. Far too close. Right. Let me take it a little bit further away, and what I'll do is unplug this and replug it as well. So bear with me a second. I'm going to walk off in the other direction. There we go. So it's all bound, which is great. So if you wiggle the stick, you should get to both servos moving. Now, I can't actually see them moving, but I can hear them moving. You could, if you wanted to see them moving, pop an arm on, but I'm confident those are working. What I mainly want to do is just make sure that all of my settings, well, certainly my elevator and rudder setting, are centered, so that I know that when I put the arm on, we're in a centered position on the servo, because it's obviously going to be installed in the kit before we do that. So I'm just going to adjust my trims to make sure. And also I'm going to check in my servo setup to see if I've got any sub trim. And I do have some sub trim on my elevator and my rudder, so I'm going to go and take those off. See if I've got some expo set up, but let's have a look. So I've just got 25% on rudder, and 25% on elevator. So I'll leave it at that for now. Back to list, back to main screen. So I'm happy with how this is set up now. The only other thing that I could do is just hook up the motor just to make sure it's working. Now I should have really done that, and I probably did explain that it should be done before you install it, but here's me chancing my arm. So let me just switch all this off, and we'll test that. I'll pause while I do that. So it's all hooked up now. I've got my motor attached, and I just need to check whether well, make sure the servos work still. Yeah, that's fine. And we have a motor too. So that's all good. Happy with the electronics. We can now proceed to install. So I've just disconnected everything, put the receiver to one side for now, and we can concentrate on putting our servos into the little slots that are provided. You'll notice that there is a up to the camera. There's a little cutout at the edge of the holes that have been cut for the servos, and that's to allow the lead to come up. We're going to tuck the vast majority of the servo lead down into the fuselage out of the way, and then the tail with the connector on can come up through there and into the receiver, which we'll be installing just here. So let's just go and do exactly that. So we're going to pop. I'm going to have the servo horn as close to the rear as possible, so we don't have to have too long a control rod. So I'm just going to tuck the vast majority of the cable down into the fuselage. I can always draw more up if I need it, and then the servo should be snugly fitting. He said, come on. There we go. Into the hole provided. There we go. And we've got our servo lead sticking out there, and we pop it back in, we can draw it back out as much as we need, and So we'll just do exactly the same with the other servo. So just loop the cable in, make sure that it is coming out of that little cutout, and then pop the servo in place. Now there are some screws that you can use to secure the servo in place, but I'm actually going to, well, I mean, they're pretty secure anyway, but I'm just going to use a little blob of foam safe glue to do that. Now that I'm happy that the servo, this is almost like a dry fit of the servos, I'm just going to draw them up slightly like that, just so I can get a little bit of glue between the servo, the little flange on the sides of the servos, and the plywood that they're sitting in. So just add a little blob either side like that, and it's not as easy, but a little blob there and there. And now when I sit them down, they'll squish down on the glue, and then we can leave them to dry there, and that should be secure enough for holding them for this little aircraft. Good. So servos installed. Let's now connect the servos, or the flight surfaces, up to the servos. So let's just go and get the bits that we need for that. Now, if you received the cricket as a Secret Santa for 2025, and you happen to be living a fair way away from the UK, then you may well have received these control rods in your kit, like so, and these 1mm carbon fibre rods as well. Now, those are the original, I'll say the original kit. We didn't get the wireforms through in time for sending out the Secret Santa to the far-flung countries that ordered them. So what we did was we put in what we generally use in the in both of the twin engine aircraft for their elevator and rudder control, and also what we use in the Albatross for the rudder and elevator control. So that's what you're seeing here, and essentially what would need to be done is that you'll cut at a point on these parts here to create a piece that will go in one end of this carbon fibre rod, and cut off another piece and shape it so it will go through the servo arm from the other end of these pieces of control rod. So we'll go through that. But if you've got the latest kit, or have got the Secret Santa and live closer to the UK, you will have two carbon fibre parts that are 1.5 millimeters in diameter rather than 1. And in the little baggie that you get with the bits, you should also have a couple of control rods like so for the elevator and the rudder, and you'll also have a couple of servo ends as well, like so. So essentially we're making up the exact same part, but we're making them from different materials. This is just for a select few, and this is how it goes from here on in on the cricket. So let's get started. Firstly, we need to work out our bends on the aircraft. So that you'll see at the end here, this little Z bend that we've got. On one is at right angles to the U-bend, and on the other it is running with in exactly the same direction as the U-bend. So that what we want is the U-bend to be facing downwards on the aircraft. So I'm just rotating it so it's facing downwards, and that's going to fit through the control horn on our rudder. So that's the rudder control. We'll keep to that side, and that is our elevator control. Now what we want is when we set up the aircraft, we want this obviously coming in through the hole in the fuselage and running up to the servo that we've allocated for it. So what I'm actually going to suggest is we put a bend in these control wires so that they easily go into the fuselage, don't rub on the sides of the hole, and are nice and clear, and obviously don't bind the servo up. So let's just hold our, grab a pair of pliers. So hold our control rod where it's going to sit, and then work out where we're going to put the bend in. So we're going for a gentle bend to take it into the cavity of the aircraft, which I think should be around about there. So with the U-bend oriented in the correct direction, so that's going to be like so. We'll just put a neat little bend in there so that you can see it goes into the fuselage at that point there. And then we'll put in a return bend so that the rod runs parallel with the direction of movement, like so, so that when that is within the cavity of the aircraft, you can see that it will move appropriately, like so. So I just need to give that a little bit of a tweak. It's not completely parallel. There we go, like so. So there we have, let's see, so that is about 100 millimeters of material. It's actually, I think with the bending, it works out at 110. So if you do have these longer, thinner control rods, push rods, then measure from the back forward 110 and then cut it off, and then you'll have exactly the same as what we've got here, just slightly thinner, slightly lighter. So once we've done that, we can then insert this into our carbon fibre rod, and you'll notice that this is a little on the loose side, and we can glue it in place using the CA glue. Or the other thing we can do is put a very, very gentle kink in this. So just going to slightly overbend it, take it to the center, and then bend that towards me just ever so slightly. That's probably a little bit too much. You can see the kink there. That is probably excessive. So let's just take that out a bit. And then when you come to slide it into the carbon fibre, it's a little more friction than before, and so you've got a relatively tight fit of that carbon fibre. We're not going to glue it just yet. We're just going to make sure that we've got everything lined up and as we want it before we start permanently popping these in place. But there we go. So now at the other end, what we want to do is we've got our servo end piece here. Now, if you have the single continuous push rod, what you need to do is cut about safely about 40 mil of the wire, put a little Z bend in the end of it, and you'll have exactly what we have here. And once again, that goes in and it's relatively loose in there, and that would obviously, if we were to glue it, that would probably be fine. But what we're going to do is put that little kink in again, so that it has a little more friction when it's inserted in the tube. There we go. What you don't want to do when you're putting that kink in is don't do it too much, because you could end up splitting the carbon fibre, and then that causes other problems. So obviously we can rotate this as we need it, because once it's inside there, we'll obviously be able to see how we want the servo arm to sit within there, and how this will go through that servo arm. So let's just pop that in. So the rudder, let's have a look. Well, it doesn't really matter at the moment. We can choose either for the rudder, because we don't want our control wires to cross. The rudder is going to be on this side, just here. So let's just pop this through. And a little bit of jigging and jinking is going to be required to get this through. There we go. Through it comes. You can see it just there. And in fact, you can connect up the rudder now, should you wish, and don't lose it inside. So these control horns are super flexible, so you can flex it off to one side, push that Z bend through. I'll try and use something a little more substantial. There we go. Push the Z bend through, and then you have it all connected up. So, and just make sure that moves nice and freely. There we go. So we have our, we're going on this side, aren't we? That's it, going on this side. There we go. We have our control rod coming up here, and as you can see at the moment, the actual rod itself needs pulling forward a little bit. So I'm going to hold it at the back, just give it a little tug forward. So this comes, what we want is for this Z bend here to sit alongside the servo, where our servo control arm is going to be. So just give that another little. There we go. Just maybe let's just make sure the rudder is staying nice and straight while we're doing this. Just a little bit more. There we go. So that's where we want it to sit. I'm going to, at the moment, the Z bend is sitting upright, so you can see I want it actually facing downwards. So I'm just going to give that a quick twist. Make sure I've got it where I want it, sitting. So, another little twist, it's still kicking off to one side. Okay, so that's the dimension of the control rod that we want. We're going to disconnect it carefully at this end because we don't want to move the dimensions around at all now. So we'll just gently kick this out, then extract it. Aha! The magnet has taken hold. Let's just carefully remove that. Here she comes. Make sure you don't catch it on the way out so that it once again changes the dimensions. Well, once we're happy with that, we can check that this is still facing down, like so. This end is also facing down at the similar angle to the U, like so. And then we're going to add a couple of dabs of the rocket glue just to secure it in place. Just to the entrance of the carbon fibre, there and there. There we go. So we'll let that dry off and repeat the process for the elevator. So this works in exactly the same way for the smaller carbon fibre. They're very similar dimensions to each other for both kits or both styles that have been provided. So it just used exactly the same process for that. So on this side, we've got the control rod going through. So we'll put in a bend around about there. And then have that kink out at about there. So that sits nicely at the entrance to the fuselage for the control rod. And then just put that little deviation so that we get the increased friction in the carbon fibre tube. A little bit too much. Not enough. There we go. Okay, and then I need to put a little kink in that too. a bit too much. There we go. Cool. So it's just a matter of once again inserting that into the fuselage, getting things lined up, and then adding the glue to it. So if you want to see me struggle again, by all means keep watching. If not, fast forward. So I'm just staring down the barrel of the fuselage at the moment, just to make sure that magnet's really good for grabbing it once it's up by the cockpit. Okay, let's get this hooked up. There we go. So I have made the ultimate error here and bent the wire the wrong way. Oh, silly me. I'm sure there are a number of you shouting at the screen, going, "John, you've done it the wrong way, you idiot." So let's just grab that out of there. And indeed, what I didn't do was put the right way up, which is the wrong way up because everything's upside down. So let's just reverse that. Reverse that. And try again. There we go. Right, that's better. Stir down the barrel. Oh, managed to get it past the magnet before it grabbed it. So let's go again. Hook up that elevator. Like so, I'm just using the outer hole at the moment. That's what I'm going to initially fly it on anyway. So it's pretty easy to change. So now we have our elevator. There's a little bit of clicking there. There's obviously tiny little bit of binding on the Tyvek, but we sort that out in due course. And with the elevator flat, just pulled out a little bit of. There we go. So that's pretty much where I need it. We need to put a little bit of an extra bend in that as well. As you see, it's springing off slightly, so I'd rather it not be particularly springy. Just checking out, looking down once again, looking down through, see where I can make some adjustments. So I think what it could do with is a little more of a bend. So at the moment where it's sitting, you can see that it's kinking it. Well, it's obviously too straight, so I need to just apply a little more bend there. You can see where we're at. Probably just bend that in slightly as well to tidy it up a bit. That looks to be a little bit better. Let's just pop it in and check, and then once we're happy with that, we can grab the control rod out of the aircraft and glue up the joins. There we go. That's much better. But still, well, it doesn't seem to be rubbing on anything anyway, so I think that'll be fine. Cool. Right, I'll grab this out, glue up those joins, we'll let them set, and I'll come back and we can start attaching them to the servos. So I've popped my elevator control rod back in, and it's up here. I haven't put both of the control rods in just to keep things clearer and easier to manage. So we're going to be hooking the control rod up to this servo here. So I'll get my little servo arm, which is like so, and you'll notice two holes. Once again, I'm going to use the outer hole. That gets the most movement out of the servo. Obviously, the closer to the center of the movement you get, smaller the movement, the linear movement you get. So I'm going to install this onto the control rod first, onto that little Z bend, like so. And then I'm going to pop it onto the servo itself. So let me just use. I tend to use my hands, but I'll try and use the pliers instead. So I'm going to install, and obviously what I want is that this arm to be as perpendicular to the servo as possible. So there we go, and I'm just going to press that down onto the little servo spigot, and it's in place, as easy as that. And then I can screw the tiny little securing screw into the top of that. I'm not at the moment. I'm just going to make sure everything works, everything's fine. It's just a step that I don't have to take if things have to be reversed. So I'll just pop that down there for now, and it's quite happy where it is. The only problem that you may have noticed is I've put it onto the wrong servo. That was, of course, completely deliberate. So let's just wiggle that off there, flip that round. Hilarious. And then pop that back onto the other one on this side. So there we go. That was fairly easy. So no dramas. So let's just do that for the other side as well. I've got my servos both hooked up now to the tail feathers, and all we've got to do is put the receiver in place. A couple of things we need to think about when we're placing it is obviously we've got a nice space just here to do so. Is firstly, obviously, we've got our motor wire to think of and manage, and we've also got the wires for the servos to manage too. Now they go into these two sockets there and there, and obviously we've got moving servo arms here. So what we don't want is this too far back where those arms are going to catch on the servo leads, and we don't want it too far forward because we've got to manage our battery cable as well. Now the battery cable we're going to put down this hole here between the two servos, and that will come out into, you can see down there, the hatch itself. So that all works nicely. I'm going to actually put a twist into the wire. I just feel it's a little more solid when it's got a bit of a twist in it. It does shorten it a little bit, but not a huge amount. And then I'm going to very carefully bend it round because it's going to go forward of the receiver, so we'll have the motor connector pointing forward, and then we can just pop that down into the gap there. In fact, I'll just open the hatch at the bottom there, so it'll just come out through and dangle down there. We've got our little sticky pad to stick this onto the plywood surface that we've got there, and I just need to cut that, probably easiest with scissors, so that it just sits on the bottom of that. The full length is fine, we just don't need all of the pad. That should do it. I just peel off and pop that on there. There we go. And then just peel off the back there. And pop that down. The antenna can slip down through between the servos. Just get that lead from underneath. Then that's quite happy to sit there like so. There we go. So we've only got a few things to connect up now. Using our orientation card here, the elevator, which is here, is the socket over there, and the socket just here is for the rudder. So these cables cross over the receiver. So let's just plug those in, making sure we get the plugs around the right way. There we go, and then any excess cable we can tuck in. And there's some of you guys out there make such a good job of cable routing. It's it's almost embarrassing for me to be showing this to you, but there we go. There we go. Just tuck that down and flatten it out. There we go. And then the last part of the puzzle is to actually obviously connect up my motor. Now I haven't worked out which way round it should be yet, because obviously you can plug it in that way or you can plug it in that way. But let's connect it up. It's easy enough to get back into the hatch, connect and disconnect. So let's just tuck it in there for now. We can see what it all looks like anyway. There we go. So I'm just going to try and get the cables away from that screw that's holding the motor on. Just going to tuck them underneath there, so in the event of a hard landing that doesn't pierce any of our systems. There we go. So we've got our lead coming out here, which I'll just tuck in for now and pop that down there, and then you can see our nice neat setup for the Micro Aces cricket. Now the question is the hatch going to go on? Fabulous. How about that? Cool. Right, that's the electronics done. Let's get on to the other little bits and pieces that we're going to do to finish the kit off. Firstly, we've got these little bits waiting for us, 274s on the thick Tyvek sheet. And let's just grab those both out of the sheet itself. Ooh, look at me using a ruler to put a cut in. I don't need to do that. There we go. Release. So these are the little spats or covers for the undercarriage. And you'll notice that they have some little square cuts in them, there and there. And what we're going to do is just run down 2 scores from each corner of the square cut. So that's why I had the ruler out. So let's just. This is slightly bowed. I think the sunshine coming in from the window has slightly bowed the cutting mat. I must invest in a new one. So let's just put that score there. That one there. There you can see the two scores there, and that just means when we fold it over we get a little bit of an area for the undercarriage leg to the wire leg to sit in, and we just wrap it round like so. Slightly too long though on mine. Oh, that's a bit weird. So I'm going to cut mine down. I don't know whether it's why that should be, but there we go. Let's just work out where that needs to be cut. So I don't know if it's too long on yours, but let's just grab a pen. So that's where I'm going to cut mine. Go. Let's hope it's the same on the other side. Yes, there we go. That's fine. Okay. So all we need to do to glue this on is we'll run a little bit of glue down the leading edge on the inside. Bit of clearance required. Getting close to requiring a new a new glue. There we go, as I said. Down the leading edge on the inside, and then just on the trailing edge on one side, and then we'll do the old transfer. So just pop that on like that, and then I'm just going to let it sit there. It's open at the moment, like so, but once the glue has dried off a bit, we'll get that down and glued together. So we'll do exactly the same on this side. Go and just use the bit that we cut off from the other just to show us where to cut on this part. There we go. And glue this up too. This is purely for decoration, really. Makes it look a little bit better than just having the wire form dangling out the bottom of the aircraft. Okay, let's just put that around the other side. Okay, right, this one should be ready for attachment. There we are. No need to glue it to the fuselage. Just let it, because it will flex. So you want it to have a bit of mobility. Let's press that together. Now, whilst we're down at the undercarriage level, we can, let's just grab, we can put our little Velcro tab, on the other side of the Velcro tab, onto the fuselage. So, get this out of your pack, a little furry dot, and then that can be popped onto the underside of the fuselage so that our little pull tab actually has something to bond to, like so. Now you might find that the sticky on the Velcro is not quite sticky enough. So don't be afraid to add a little more sticky to it in the form of some foam to foam. Just belt and braces. And then pop that onto the Tyvek. I'm not going to stick it down just yet, I'm just going to let the glue do its thing before I test it. There we go, so that's there. And of course the other thing we can do is add the wheels. So you've probably already seen in your bag o' bits 2 tyres, 2 little 3D printed wheels, and 2 even Didier end caps. There and there. So these wheels, pretty easy. Just as a matter of note, the what's it called? Resin. The resin that these are made from takes paint very well. So if you wanted to paint these up, whether you wanted to do it yellow, blue, silver, whatever you like, go to town. You could paint each spoke completely different. So the tyres just sit on the rim like so, and then obviously these just pop onto the little axles either side like so. And then to retain them, we have these little half moons, and they should slot on with a little more friction than the wheels themselves. So let's just do this one. And you're putting them on. If you don't do that, or you end up with a hole in your thumb. There we go. So you can wind them on a bit so that you don't get too much flexibility, but obviously you don't want them on so far that it stops the wheel going round. So there we go. And once they are on, you can just add a little blob of the old cyano glue. To either side. There we are. And there we have our wheels on. So, last bits really are on the home straight here. We've got a motor to pop on, and we've got the wings to attach. So a motor, a prop to pop on. So our wing attachments are 2 elastic bands. There we go. Don't stretch them too much. And the prop is a GWS 5030, like so. Now, we supply this little rubber prop adapter, and it is pretty adequate for this motor, especially if you're not absolutely gunning it. But there have been instances, because obviously it uses friction to grip onto the prop shaft, where there's maybe been a little bit of oil or some sort of contaminant introduced to the equation, and it very quickly turns the aircraft into a glider with no prop. So this spins off and flies forward. Now, there are a couple of ways of getting over this. Firstly, you could actually clean the prop shaft itself with a cotton bud soaked in some methylated spirits or lighter fluid or that sort of thing, just to get any grease off. And the other thing is you can actually pop a little bit of foam to foam glue in there as you push the prop onto the motor, and that will actually create quite a bit of friction as well. I find that quite a good way of doing it. The other alternative is that the motors are supplied with a prop saver adapter that you can use instead of the rubber prop adapter that we use. So there is that alternative as well. So you have a choice. So let's pop the prop on first. I'm going to take the cover off just so that I can hold on to the motor mount behind here as I pop the prop on. It's literally just a push fit with our rubber prop adapter, like so. Push it all the way home. It's not making contact with any of the rest of the aircraft, so that's perfect. So let's pop our hatch back on, and of course the hatch won't need to come off that often because it's the hatch on the underside that takes the battery. So that's all good. Now let's just attach the wings in the traditional crossover method. This is where they so you don't have to be too elegant or accurate about this to start off with. We can jig around with it. So let's just use the pegs to attach. And you can see that's not how I want the wing to sit, but let's just move it into a more reasonable position, and then add our second rubber band, or as we term it in the UK, a lackey band. There we go, and then everything sits beautifully, and the aircraft is ready. Now, centre of gravity is around about that position there, so it's not quite, it's forward of the simulated spar. In fact, the spar is in there somewhere, but it's forward of the simulated spar, and obviously we've also got a battery that goes in too. So let me show you how that battery mounts. So basically you take your battery, you've got your lead here, that pops in there, everything comes to life, and then you just pop the battery in. The actual wire and the connector sits into the little cutout there, and then you can close it down and your battery is in place and things are ready to go. So, centre of gravity, there shouldn't need to be any ballast added. This should be pretty perfect. So that's where centre of gravity is. It's probably about, well, let's just see, about 10 mil forward of the simulated spar. But what I'd suggest is probably just get it up in the air and see how it behaves, because it should be a pretty docile flyer, and you should only need to fly it at half throttle at most times, and then it can get quite lively above that. So if you want to perform some fairly basic aerobatics, even rudder rolls, then this is the aircraft to do it in. So there we have it. That is our Micro Aces cricket, all ready for the field. Let's have a quick look at how it flies.